The pact hit like a lightning strike, my friends, but the silence that followed was the true shock. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was the terrifying, deafening hush of a reality that had just been violently reset. When the pure, chaotic emerald light of the seer and the dense cobalt field of the Alpha King converged, the world didn't cheer or recoil. It stalled. Every heartbeat, every breath, every terrified energy signature in the vast, ancient Hall of Judgment paused, trapped within the immense new aura that now pulsed from the platform. For a full minute, no one moved. The air smelled of burnt ozone and ancient power, and the feeling was one of overwhelming, undeniable fate. Sarah, the girl who had spent 6 long years pretending the world was silent and dark, felt her entire existence tilt. Her power, the seer's sight, which had always been a screaming, multi-layered torrent of possibilities and disasters, now flowed into her consciousness like a powerful river guided into a perfectly cut channel. The chaotic noise was replaced by resonant, directed power. She felt a profound, exhausting release, followed by a dangerous, unprecedented clarity. The lie was dead, but the life it bought was just beginning. If this story has sucked you in, if you're already feeling the cold dread of the Herod and the electric pull of the Alpha King's desperate commitment, then you know you need to hear the rest of their journey. Don't miss a single beat of this fated union. Please click the subscribe button right now and like this video so we can keep bringing you more of Sarah and Cooper's battle for the veil. The burden of silence and sight. For 6 years, Sarah's life had been a meticulous performance. She existed in a state of sensory warfare. The moment her sight had awakened, she was flooded. She didn't just see people, she saw their auras, pulsing emotional clouds that ranged from the honest, tired gold of a guard to the shifting, anxious crimson of the elders. She saw premonitions, flashes of futures that were too often horrifying, and she saw the veil, the fragile, shimmering dimensional barrier, which looked like a vast, bruised sheet stretched taut between mountain peaks. To survive this torrent, she had to retreat. She had to create the persona of the blind, slightly deaf girl. It was the perfect camouflage. Pity bought her safety and the quiet she needed to avoid going insane. Her grandmother's voice, a persistent, loving memory, echoed in her mind. Sometimes, little one, the greatest strength lies in appearing weak. This camouflage was essential because Sarah knew what she was, the seer of the veil. Her family line was the living anchor to the dimensional barrier. Her power was a double-edged sword. If it was exposed, she would either be forced into a dangerous political marriage or, far worse, targeted by the ancient enemy, the Herod, the soulless entities seeking to tear the veil and consume their world. She stood at the mating ritual, terrified but steady, the combined scent of the assembled pack, a complex, dizzying cloud of emotion. And then, he appeared. Alpha King Cooper Allen. He didn't just walk in. He commanded the air, the stone, and the will of every wolf present. His presence was a physical pressure, dense, cold, and smelling of iron and high mountain pine. The scent of a lonely, powerful warrior. He was the embodiment of the shield, hard, immovable, and utterly solitary. His aura was an intimidating, controlled cobalt blue, a disciplined force that seemed to absorb the light and energy around him. When he stopped directly before her, the crowd's energy became frantic, but Sarah's world narrowed to the soundless, high-frequency thrum of his being. He didn't use the expected pack-dominant stare. Instead, a thought, clear and razor-sharp, slammed into the core of her consciousness, bypassing every mental barrier she possessed. It was the first true mental communication she'd ever received that wasn't from her own mind. It was his voice, metallic and smooth, right inside her skull. "Look at me, little liar." The terror was absolute, gut-wrenching. He knew. Yet, she held the blank, passive expression. Relying on her years of practice, she was chosen, pulled from the line, not with reverence, but with a cold, terrifying grip on her forearm. The lie was exposed, But the life or death game had only just begun. The irony was suffocating. She had run straight into the arms of the only being powerful enough to detect her. The gauntlet of the keep, the moment his gloved hand closed over her arm, the chaos of the pack dimmed. His power, though contained, was a shockwave, cold, sharp, and utterly controlled. She was immediately whisked away, not to a loving home, but to the Iron Claw Keep, a silent black mountain of ancient stone that felt less like a fortress and more like a high-security tomb. The air inside the polished basalt walls was sterile, heavy with the weight of generations of royal responsibility. The inner circle feast became the stage for her final performance. Alan sat at the head of the table, his scrutiny a physical weight that pressed on her every nerve. The tests began, subtle and psychologically cruel. The tossed napkin was the first test. It fluttered silently toward the floor. Sarah didn't see the white cloth, but she felt the minute displacement of Alan's powerful aura, the split-second shift of his attention toward the falling object. A quick, blinding jolt of foresight, a flash of white against black stone, told her exactly where it would land. She managed to catch it, fumbling slightly, perfectly playing the part of the devoted, clumsy blind girl. In her mind, she felt that low, metallic chuckle from Alan. Interesting. Then, the test of knowledge, the mural. "Tell me, Sarah," his physical voice demanded, loud and clear for the sake of the elders. "What does the founding wolf hold in its forepaw?" She closed her eyes tighter, pulling her seer's sight inward, focusing it on the carved stone relief itself. She perceived the form, the ancient energy imprinted into the relief. "It holds the broken arrow, Alpha King," she replied softly, adding the perfect, breathy quiver of uncertainty to her tone. Finally, the golden plum nudged silently off a tray onto the dark carpet right by her chair. She avoided stepping on it with an unnatural, perfect precision, maneuvering her feet like a dancer who already knew the choreography of the dark floor. When Alan dismissed the others, leaving only his beta, Marcus, a rock-solid, vigilant gray aura that never wavered, and Sarah, the silent conversation began. "Your heart rate is too steady for a terrified blind girl, Sarah. Tell me what you really see." His mental voice was a precise, high-frequency signal, penetrating everything. She fought back with raw, overwhelming emotional projections, mental images of forced helplessness and fear, clinging desperately to the 6-year-old lie. But he leaned close, his scent, pine, stone, and raw ozone, overwhelming her senses. He dropped his voice to a whisper that vibrated in her bones, a final physical move designed to break her. "I see the truth in your eyes, Sarah. It is only a matter of when you will break, and I suggest you do it before the Herod arrive, because I cannot protect a weapon I do not understand." The Herod shadow and the fatal trap, the weeks that followed, were an agonizing stretch of cold, psychological warfare. Alan kept her close, forcing her to be present at strategy sessions, observing her every reaction. He made no move to punish her, but the lie hung between them like a drawn sword. Her only comfort was her guard, JL, a low-ranking warrior whose aura was an exhausted but deeply honest gold. Sarah's guilt was a constant companion. She was deceiving a good man, using his genuine pity as a shield. But the inner politics quickly dissolved as the prophecy became terrifying reality. Sarah began experiencing violent, unbidden prophetic flashes of danger sight. They weren't just feelings. They were images slammed into her mind, skeletal, consuming shadows clinging to the outer walls of the keep. She saw the horrifying name Herod etched in lines of pure, psychic pain, and the image of the veil tearing like old parchment. Then, the breach. A chaotic alarm ripped through the keep. Not a bell, but the primal collective scream of the pack's mental network. The scent of ozone and rot filled the air. The Herod were here, striking fast and targeting the highest levels. Sarah, clinging to her persona, was ushered down winding, dark stone stairs. Alan appeared, his aura an intense, commanding blue, instantly calming the rising hysteria. He used his physical presence to shield her, his powerful frame blocking the frantic movements of the guards. His proximity was a terrifying dichotomy, crushing power, yet strangely secure comfort. Just as they neared the deep stone safe room, Sarah's vision flared, clearer and more violent than ever before. She saw the truth. The safe room was not a sanctuary, it was a trap. A dark figure was already waiting inside the stone, poised to strike. She tried to cry out, to warn Jael, but she could only manage a choked, frightened sound, the noise of a terrified blind girl, which was instantly dismissed as fear in the panic. They were sealed in the stone trap. The massive iron door slammed shut, plunging them into the final, suffocating blackness. Sarah's mind snapped wide open. She felt the harrowed leader, a figure whose essence was a vacuum of light, materialize from the cold stone itself. He bypassed the flailing guards and moved with frightening speed, gliding directly toward her cousin, Lena, who was huddled in the corner. The leader grabbed Lena, his cold presence instantly leeching the light from her aura, but then he stopped. He turned his head, his sockets of pure void locking directly onto Sarah, standing still and sightless by the wall. His mental voice was a searing brand of hate. Not that one. The seer of the veil. Give us the hidden one. The lie shattered. They were hunting her. The protective instinct, the raw, primal need to save the one person who had stood by her, overcame 6 years of fear. Sarah snapped her head up. Her eyes, which had been dull, gray, and unfocused, now blazed open, filling with emerald light, the terrifying, unconstrained color of her forbidden bloodline. She located the leader's mental anchor point, the cold thread connecting him to the void. She unleashed everything, every repressed memory, every bit of hidden power, all channeled into a single, blinding, kinetic psychic wave. The emerald light struck the harrowed leader like a physical explosion, shattering his anti-light essence and sending the creatures reeling back toward the walls. Sarah collapsed, utterly exhausted, her lungs burning, her secret undeniably exposed to the 2 remaining terrified guards and her cousin. Just as the residual ozone cleared, the iron door burst open with a metallic clang. Alpha King Cooper Allen stood framed in the opening, his aura a storm of fury and relief. He bypassed everyone. His eyes locked entirely on Sarah, lying on the stone floor, her eyes wide open, still faintly shimmering with residual emerald light. The lie was over. The Union forged in war. The interrogation that followed was devastating. Allen cleared the chamber, his voice low and dense with authority as he demanded the full truth. Sarah, weak and defeated, confessed everything: the sight, the power, the lie, and her grandmother's warning. And then, Allen delivered the counterblow. The piece of the puzzle she had missed. I knew, Sarah. I've known you weren't blind since you failed to trip over the carpet I laid specifically for you at the feast. He explained that the ritual was a lure, designed to draw her, the invaluable, hidden seer of the veil, into his protection before the harrowed could find her. The realization shattered her. Her deception hadn't saved the world. It had simply forced the king to protect her under impossible constraints. The only way to shield her volatile power and bind the veil was through a sacred, ancient pact, a formal mating. It was destiny. The next few days were a blur of training. Sarah was no longer a prisoner, but a strategic weapon. Allen personally took charge, forcing her to filter the constant, overwhelming noise of auras. Their sessions became an intimacy of power. When her sight overloaded, he would push his aura into hers, a steady, immense force of cobalt blue that absorbed the chaos. Sarah learned that Allen's essence wasn't just power. It was a shield, capable of deflecting the psychic drain of the enemy. In return, Sarah used her sight to delve into him. She saw past the armor and the crown to the deep, buried loneliness of his role, the raw exhaustion, and the silent, crushing fear of failing his pack. This was the genesis of their shared vulnerability, a bond forged in the crucible of duty and exhaustion, a reliance deeper than any romantic love. As their mental connection deepened, political chaos erupted. The elders were outraged, demanding her banishment for her initial deception. Elder Theron led the charge, but Alan held the line. He refuted the political attacks by reframing her crime as a necessary defense, and then Sarah proved her value. Scanning the assembly, her emerald eyes blazing, she spotted the shadow mark deep in the aura of Alpha Lysander, the visiting delegate. Alpha Lysander is compromised. His soul is anchored to the void. Lysander's desperate lunge and subsequent capture silenced the opposition instantly. The necessity of the mate declaration was now absolute. The final vow, the Hall of Judgment, was silent, tense, and utterly electric for the final ceremony. Sarah stood on the platform, composed and focused, her emerald eyes fixed on Alan. Alan began his speech, publicly revealing the full, terrifying truth of the harrowed threat. When Elder Theron made his final challenge, "She lied, her word is broken," Alan shut him down with cold finality. Necessity is the only law. Then came the true climax, the moment that defied history and tradition. Alan stepped toward Sarah, and in a gesture not seen in centuries, a gesture of profound respect for her bloodline, Alpha King Cooper Allen knelt on one knee before the seer of the veil. He took her right hand, his gaze locked entirely on her eyes. He spoke the ancient, forbidden binding words of the pact, his voice resonant with deep, powerful certainty. "The Age of Shadows requires the union of fates," Alan declared. "The seer and the alpha, the sight and the shield. Sarah Evans, of the Seers of the Veil. I, Cooper Allen, Alpha King, call you my mate. Be bound to the pact, be bound to me." Sarah looked into his eyes, saw the truth of his burden, and accepted her destiny. "I accept the pact," she declared, her voice clear and strong. "I accept you, Cooper Allen." The fusion was instantaneous. A blinding wave of kinetic psychic energy, Alan's steady cobalt and Sarah's vibrant emerald, erupted from their joined hands, washing over the entire assembly. The energy stabilized the pack's frantic auras, forming an immense, visible protective shield around the hall. The union of fates was complete. The axis of destiny, the after aura, lingered. Sarah's sight was now perfectly stabilized, filtered through Alan's unshakable core. The psychic noise was gone, replaced by clarity. The entire pack felt the change. The chaotic fear was subdued by the immense unified power of their bonded rulers. That first night in the royal chamber was spent in strategic communion. Alan removed his armor and his mask, revealing the honest exhaustion of the king. "Tonight, we are just Cooper and Sarah," he confessed, "two weary people facing a wall of darkness." Sarah reached out and touched the psychic fault lines she saw in his aura, the unhealed wounds he'd hidden. This was their truest intimacy. "I can see the price of the shield, Cooper. You are my lightning rod." He pulled her into an embrace, not of passion, but of raw, consuming weariness. "I need you to use the sight without reservation, Sarah," he admitted. "If you shield me, I can hold the veil. We are the Axis, Sarah." At dawn, the war began in earnest with the First Order. Sarah took her place at the head of the table. Using her now perfect sight, she pinpointed the exact time and location of the final assault. The third hour after sunset, 2 days from now, targeting the Valley of Whispers. She corrected the general's defensive plan, her voice ringing with cold authority. "We must allow the opening," she commanded. "We lure the core strike through the valley and meet them at the Serpent's Coil. The geography will negate their numbers, and we will have the concentration of power needed to stop the tear itself." Her instructions were so precise, they named troop placements and shifting maneuvers the generals hadn't conceived of. Alan's hand rested on her shoulder, anchoring her energy. "You have heard the Seer's first order," he stated. "We move now. The veil is not our line. The Serpent's Coil is." Standing on the high battlement, As the sun began its final descent before the attack, Sarah looked out at the vast, mobilized pack. My grandmother always told me, "The greatest strength lies in appearing weak," Sarah murmured. I thought she meant the lie. But the greatest power is in truthful unity. My sight was dangerous when I hid it. Your shield was a burden when you had to carry it alone. Now, we are two parts of the same whole, and the cost is simply existence. Alan took her hands, his fingers intertwined with hers. No glove, no armor, just skin. His touch was warm, steady, and certain. 2 days, seer, he said, his gaze fixed on the distant dark horizon where the shadows of the veil gathered. The lie is dead, the pact is sealed, and the strategy is set. I see the darkness coming, Cooper, she replied, claiming the intimacy they had forged. But I also see the strength of our shield, and I will not let you fail. They stood, an immovable axis of fate, fully bonded and prepared. The darkness was coming, but now they were ready to meet it, not as two individuals, but as one unbreakable, terrifying force. The serpent's coil waited, and the harrowed were on the move, unaware that the blind seer was now watching their every step. The sun was setting on the fragile world, and the union of fates was all that stood between the light and the void.